It's the first time the coaches have a chance to talk about the players. The board will be basically set probably next Friday or Saturday with a few tweaks along the way. We're excited. We see the draft as a great opportunity for us to get better as a team. We've got five picks. We wish we had more. Our goal is probably to get more along the way if we can, depending on how things fall. But we see a great opportunity for us to add some quality players and to be a better football team come September. Questions?
Eric, it's been a week since Lamar tweeted about having the trade request and saying goodbye to the fans with the Ravens. Have you had a chance to talk to him since? And what was the conversation like? And when a player asks, say, he wants to be traded, what's your confidence level of him being able to be in playing this year with the Ravens?
Yeah, so those are, I understand the need to ask those kind of questions. I think just out of respect for the process, this is a draft luncheon, and we're going to try to keep as much of this discussion as we can to the draft, to the coming weeks, building the best football team we can build. So I understand those questions. I think we've spoken about this situation probably 5 different times this spring in various different press conferences and such. So we're going to try to just kind of defer to those questions and move forward to the draft.
So Eric, the corners in the draft, it seems like, the corners are big, extremely fast. I mean, at 22, you want extra picks and maybe trade back, or there's so much depth there at the corner spot.
Yeah, Vinny, it's a strong position. Probably 4 or 5 guys that you look at and say, yeah, that's a first-round type of guy. That's a first-round pick, maybe 6 guys. So us, we have a history of drafting defense in the first round. We love corners. Our defense is really built to succeed with a great, strong secondary. Coach Harbaugh loves big physical press type guys. There's a lot of these type of guys in the draft. So for us to look at that, we think it's one of the most important positions on your football team, and it's a position that we'll always look at very closely.
Look at the depth of the draft, and you look at your area of needs beyond cornerback. Are there any positions where you see there's a lot of depth in an area where you're going to want to go shopping?
Yeah, I think the fans will be happy that it's a strong receiver class. Again, we see a multitude of guys that can go in the first couple of rounds. It's a great opportunity for us. I think offensive line is a strong position this year. Some defensive linemen that we like as well. So, we think it kind of shapes up nicely based on our needs. Of course, you have to have a little luck on draft day, but we see a lot of players that make us a better football team at those positions for sure.
Eric, respecting that this is about the draft, but also respecting the fact that a lot of what you guys will be doing at the draft could hinge on what happens over the next couple of weeks with Lamar and the potential offer sheet. What's your stance or preferred, outcome over the next few weeks before the draft on where things stand with Lamar? Would you like to see an outcome before round 1, or what's your guys' outlook regarding where he stands and where the organization stands before the draft and having something kind of finalized?
Yeah, I think the things that we control are really getting the list, the draft board set, evaluating the players as best as possible, being aware of the players, the free agents that are available now, post-draft, who are the players that we might have a chance to bring in post-draft that could make us a better football team as well, and then doing the best job we can in terms of recruiting free agents. Our scouts do a phenomenal job of that. I think our coaches do a great job of that, and just putting ourselves in position to win draft weekend.
With respect to this being about the draft and everything, just with the Lamar stuff that's going on.
Hey guys,
are you all looking at quarterbacks
Alex, if you can, this is about the draft. Just move off the Lamar question. We're not going to answer one more question today.
about the draft? Are you looking at quarterbacks differently because of the situations going on?
Yeah, I don't think we really are. We go into every draft trying to take any kind of bias out, any kind of need-based situation out of the draft equation. We really do try to build a board that's really best player available, and that process involves really 9 months, starting in in early August when our scouts go out on the road and they generate the profile and the evaluations and get as much information as possible. We then segue into a set of meetings in December, and then we get into the meetings in January and the All-Star games and all those different things. Really trying to assess this player versus that player, and it's really just comparisons and how these players stack up. Who do we think has the best chance to come in and make us the best football team? And so if that's a quarterback, if that's a receiver, a corner, an offensive tackle, we're going to look at that very strongly and make the best decision we can, knowing that over time we think building a team, best available player is the right way to go.
How confident are you that you'll add some draft picks before draft day?
Well, I think, Stan, we've done that 9 times in the last 4 years. So, I think the chances for us to be able to do it are pretty decent. Of course, if we're in love with somebody while we're on the clock, we're going to make the pick. We always have to gauge that. How strong do we feel about the prospect who's available versus a chance to go back and get additional picks. And sometimes you get lucky in that there's a guy that you might really want. You make the tough decision to trade back and you can still get him. It happens more than you think. Not all the time, though, of course. So we have to look at that. We have to look at the capital that we can get by trading back, and we'll make the best decision we can.
John and Joe, when you have a coordinator change in February, what extra work goes into the last couple months leading up to the draft? Knowing you're not reinventing the wheel offensively, but maybe there are some trades, different points of emphasis that you have now that maybe wouldn't have been the case before.
Yeah, well, the first thing we did in scouting was we got Todd in there in the room and talked about his offensive philosophy, the types of players he wants at each position, and what he thought about our players and the guys that are here, how they match what he can do, who fits his scheme, his system. The thing in talking to him that you love is he's versatile, and he said just give him players and he'll make them work. So that's exciting to hear as a scout. So now you just go out and try to find the best players for the Ravens and see as we go through the process, through the pro days, through the combine, through the workouts, and then next week in the meetings if they fit our scheme and can help us.
What do you deem as your biggest need right now going into the draft?
Oh, man. I never want to go into a draft thinking where that was set at any position, of course. We see a lot of times. I remember one year we thought we had a really strong tight end room, and then in the span of a few days, we had a bunch of guys that got hurt, and we were trying to find tight ends all year. We saw that, a few years ago at running back, with J.K. and Gus and Justice. So our needs can change. I wouldn't want to, pigeonhole in one specific thing, but, in general, I think, secondary is always something that we can address. Offensive line is always something. The defensive line that we should address. The receiver position. Those positions where you need multiple guys to play. I think those are important positions every single year to draft players so that you have a continuous depth in terms of when guys get hurt, you can put guys in. And I think last year's team was a good example of that, where we had depth on the offensive line and in the secondary to be able to withstand some injuries. And our goal is to always be in that position.
There was 5 picks this year. I know you said you may have looked to add more, but how does that affect your strategy going into the draft? Which is, last year you had much more than that. So how does just only 5 picks affect the strategy going into the draft?
Like last year, my strategy was I had to watch as many guys as I could because we had so many picks. I still want to watch as many guys as I can, but I don't feel the tremendous anxiety knowing that we have 6 fourth-round picks. Our goal would be to add picks if we can at some point. In saying that, I think it's important that to note that we've had a lot of picks over the last 4 or 5 years, and you get to a point where maybe having too many picks isn't necessarily the right thing in any given year. You almost have to have a purge at some point because you have all these young players on the team, and they can't all make the team if you just keep stacking these huge, massive draft classes. So I wouldn't say that it was intentional this year, but for us, to say that our second-round pick was Roquan Smith, I'm pretty happy with that, I'd like to get, if we had 5 picks this year, if we only have 5 picks this year, I'd like to get back to 9 or 10 picks next year, for sure. But having a smaller amount of picks this year, based on what we've done in 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, that's not necessarily the worst thing.
Hey, Eric, have you spent more time with sending coaches or Joe or whatever to look at the quarterbacks?
I wouldn't say we've necessarily done that, Vinny. We kind of treat the pro days kind of the same. We always canvass, we always send a lot of guys out, we always try to have a position coach at almost every pro day. We can't always get that done with all the off-season stuff they're doing. We'll have an area scout, in some cases an area scout and a director possibly, and then also potentially a coordinator, a position coach, whatever that might be. We try to get as much coverage as possible. The other thing, it's changed so much over the years, is, we get all the pro days on digitized now. So we have all the pro days. We get all the pro days within 24 hours, basically. You don't get the hands-on personal attention that you might get at a school visit, but you do get the video on tape. You get a chance to assess that as well. So it's not like it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago when you didn't have access to that stuff.
Joe, there's so much attention about the wide receiver position, as there always seems to be around here this time of year. There's certain characteristics that you think would best fit in this offense you're trying to build. What in particular are you looking for in terms of wide receivers you could bring in?
Well, I think you look at the big picture, it's a great question. There's a lot of guys that we like, right, Eric? I mean, in really every round, I think there are guys that can make our team. In the early rounds, there are a number of guys that could start for us, even. So you start with that. Then it's, okay, who fits us, in terms of what Todd's looking for, how we're building the offense, in terms of the guys we already have. So I would say that, between Eric and Joe, myself, Todd, Greg Lewis, all the scouts, really, you start saying, okay, which guys do we really like for what we're trying to do for our room, and who complement the other guys in the room? And, that's those are names, so probably not sharing those with you guys right now, but we have those names, already targeted, and we'll probably finalize that next week in terms of the guys that we'll be looking that we feel fit us the best, and hopefully we get one of those guys. But that being said, you never know. You might end up, somehow you find a guy that falls your way and he really wasn't one of the names that you thought was going to be a great fit, and he turns out to be a great player. So as long as we've got enough players, I think we do, to get guys that can help us, and we'll be in good shape.
Joe, what's your evaluation of the quarterback class?
I'd say obviously it's pretty strong up top. Those four guys that are being listed in the mocks is going high. They're all talented and good in their own right. If you break them down, Bryce is extremely accurate, cerebral, intelligent, winner. They're all winners, actually, every one of them. So it was what you love. And then, Richardson's got just raw physical talent, strong arm, athletic, big, physical, tough. Probably the least experienced of the four of them, but, has a chance to really blossom and develop. Will is, again, a physical, strong guy with a elite arm, and has gone through two different offenses the past 2 years, so he's adjusted to players changing around him. His whole offensive line was revamped. And then CJ, he just matured and grown and gotten better and better. He played his best game, his last game of his career, I thought, and really accurate, has a great feel for the field, and showed off his athleticism, certainly in that Georgia game.
John, one of your things was watching the cornerbacks. I think that was one of Eric's things that he told me, was watching the cornerback. Exactly. The possibility of Joey Porter Jr. What would that be like, considering the history of the Ravens with his father?
No doubt. I mean, seeing Joey Porter Sr., a Ravens fan, I think that'd be great for all of us. We'd all enjoy that.
Would he be, though?
Well, of course he would. Your family first, man. I'm going to give him a call, and I'm going to find out, because it would be good to know. I know for me it's family first. But Joey Porter Jr. is a heck of a player, and it's not just him. I mean, there's a lot of good corners, like Eric said, guys that we'd be excited about. But this dude knows how to play. I mean, I love the way he plays, his style. He's the Joey Porter Sr. version in a DB form. He's got a great mentality. So we'll see what happens.
Joe, when was the last time you saw a quarterback, because of the combine, shoot up? We've seen, oh my God, combine work, unbelievable. So now he becomes a superstar. But you don't hear that with quarterbacks all that often. Was that different to see because of the physical things that he did?
Yeah, gosh, it's so hard because we go to the combine and we know what he already is a lot of times. So I don't think any of the scouts were surprised that Richardson ran fast and looked the way he did, because we go through the school and you watch the LSU game, you see him take off on a 75-yard run and nobody catch him. So it's really not surprising. I think it's just so impressive. And awesome to see those physical traits on display, so he gets the buzz. I think a lot of scouts throughout the league have looked at Richardson as a first-round talent, so I don't think he really jumped up in our eyes. I think it's just the display he put on was impressive.
You selected David Ajabo last year with just 1 year of full starting experience. How difficult is it to project future performance in the NFL? Anthony Richardson, for example, for a player in college that has limited play time.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you factor that in for sure. It's hard, production is really important. I think production is a great predictor of future success, but so is talent. And so that's what we have to try to do. In some cases, you may have a very small sample size with some guys. Years and years and years and years ago, I remember a guy named Ziggy Ansah came out, and he had 1 year, and he might have had, I don't know how many sacks he had, but you could just see the talent, but he had, there wasn't a lot of history. There was a lot of questions about him. You just didn't know much about him. Those guys are challenging to evaluate in many different ways. I think good scouts can really help the process when it comes to that, and I think we're blessed here to have the continuity on staff with our scouts, to be able to settle some of those debates, some of those questions about 1 year of production, injuries, and things like that. But that's a challenging aspect of our business, I think. And sometimes you're going to make mistakes. I mean, let's not forget now, this is a business that, if you can go 75%, it's pretty good, I would say. You're betting on people. Sometimes you don't have all the answers. And so it's a challenge associated. Obviously, if you have a guy that's a 4-year starter in a SEC, you have a lot to go on. When you have a 1-year starter, or you have a small school guy, you have a guy that's injured, that makes that conversation a lot more difficult.
Eric, we talked to you in January. You said neither you nor John had any interest in a total rebuild. So I guess just with the QB class being what it is, how many guys do you think are in that class who would come in and be potential impact guys year one?
You said the quarterback? Is that what you said? Well, I mean, I think I don't want to insult anybody in the draft, but I would say there's probably more than 4 guys that can be significant quarterbacks in this league, in this draft class. There's forget about where they might get picked.
Down for you.
More than 4, but what am I going to say? 7, 8, whatever it is. But the fact is that we think that you can get a quarterback in the first round, or the 3rd round, or the 4th round, who have a chance to develop. And, go back to Tyrod Taylor. I don't know when we drafted him. Was that the 5th round, 6th round? Whatever it was. Years and years and years ago, Derek Anderson took him in with the 6th or 7th, right? So you can get good quarterbacks. You saw what the Niners did last year with Brock Purdy. It's quite possible to get a good quarterback at any point in the draft. Obviously, the GOAT, as my son would say, Tom Brady, was a 6th-round pick. So they're all over the place in the draft. You have to have good scouts. You've got to have conviction, and in some cases, you got to get lucky too.
Eric, is taking a quarterback in the first round a consideration this year?
It depends on the board, Jameson. It really does. I mean, I'd have to say yes because we have quarterbacks in our top 31. So just based on that alone, simple math, I would have to say yes.
Eric, you're a month away from the deadline. Do you anticipate you'll be picking up Patrick Queen's 5th-year option?
Yeah, that'll be a discussion we'll have with Patrick. Wouldn't want to announce anything too premature with all you guys.
Question for Eric and Joe. In the time you've been here, how much different is the perception now down the road in Maryland at what Loxley's doing and how you have to have eyeballs on his teams than it would have been 8 or 10 or 12 years ago?
Yeah, I would just say that, and then Joe can comment, but I think Coach has done a remarkable job adding talent. Every year they've got a number of guys that can play at our level and play very, very well at our level. So I think that speaks to the job he's really done down there.
Yeah, he's just having seen him over the years and watched him where he's been. He's always been a great evaluator of talent and recruiter. Has always produced players at the schools he's been at, and so he's done a great job building that program and adding really NFL talent to the roster. And Maryland's always put out some good players, but it seems like the group has grown as he's been there.
Hey, John, talk about the addition of Chucky Smith, and he'll help with the draft because, he's a pass rush guru, and all that, and, how he'll help because all he did was train these types of kids.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's probably an interesting point. He's actually worked with a number of these guys already, just professionally as a pass rush trainer, so he knows their personalities. That's an advantage for us. We have a number of guys from college. Willie Taggart, he's recruited a lot of these guys, knows a lot of these guys, so that's always an advantage for us, right? I know, Joe, Todd, obviously, has been around guys last couple of years, especially at Georgia. But Chuck, Chuck's a pass rush coach, and he's also a football coach. I mean, he's gonna coach all aspects of it, continue to develop as a coach like we all do going forward. But the pass rush stuff, man, I really haven't come across anybody better, over the last many number of years. He was here all the way back in 2008 working with our guys in training camp, and you don't forget that. So I know our guys are excited. Those young guys are excited to work with him, and he'll be, I think, like you're saying, he'll be a big addition as far as the draft, but also really coaching our guys.
Hey, Joe, back to the church for a second. Can you comment on, their wide receivers coming out, Jarrett, Demas, and Copeland?
Yeah, they're all a little different, but, Jarrett, he can fly, obviously. Copeland, same thing. Demas has been a fun guy to watch through his career. Obviously, he had the injury, and he's really, worked hard to get better, and he's developing. So I think he's on the upswing. Big physical guy with size, radius, and then Jarrett, obviously, they plays more slot, but you see that vertical go. I mean, he can really accelerate, put pressure on the defense. And then Copeland, athletic guy, transferred in, was an impact special teamer at Florida while being a vertical guy, and he's done the same at Maryland.
Joe, just two receivers you guys are linked to a lot, Flowers and Johnston. Can you talk about Flowers? Obviously his speed is there. You see him as a guy who can play anywhere, inside and outside. And also Johnson, maybe the only negative, people talk about drops, just how you evaluate that and whether that's a concern.
Yeah, we'll go to Johnson first. With the drops, you just see, when you see receiver drop balls, you see how they're doing it. Is it a tracking? Is it a hand placement issue? Is it just bad hands? Sometimes it's just he's got his hands in the wrong spot. You watch him make outstanding catches on film. You see his ability to adjust, go up and high point the ball. But he does drop some balls. Most receivers do drop a ball or two, though. But he's a big, fast, physical guy. Obviously, he has playmaking ability outside. And then going to Zay, he plays inside and out for BC, and you see the same ability coming up to this level. He's strong, even though he's not big, and certainly he can fly and put pressure. Like I said, like Jarrett, he can put pressure on the defense quickly. And and he's got outstanding hands and rack ability, so plays bigger than his size overall, I'd say.
Eric, you talked about depth, and the D-line group is really young all across the board, but you have a couple of guys who are entering contract years. Calais Campbell has moved on. Could D-line be a position that you're looking at as well?
Oh, there's no doubt. We like the group we have now. They've played well last year. I think they'll continue to play well, but we've also got to look at it from a short term, long term. What's the position going to look like? The strength of the draft class, and we think there's guys in the first 3-4 rounds that can come in and play well. And we've been fortunate. We've taken some mid-round guys in the last few years, the last 4 years, that have played well for us. We're excited about that. Justin is a talented player. He's playing his best football. Broderick, again, a guy that's maximized his ability. One of the hardest workers we have on the team, plays multiple spots. Travis is another guy. He's here every day, I think, working out. We're excited about those guys, but it takes more than 3 or 4 guys to play and to win in the NFL. So, of course, we'll look at it. We'll assess those guys versus the field, and we'll see what we come up with.
John, with your experience having gone through 15 years as a head coach in this league, as you look at draft potential, is there an equation you run through and say, okay, but how will he handle this in the NFL that you use to evaluate if a guy makes your list?
Yeah, there's a lot of equations like that. It's a great point, Jerry. To me, you start with the type of player that Eric and Joe, they start, and all the scouts evaluate. Then you just try to look at it and say, do you think his skills are going to translate? Does what he does in college, you think it's going to show up the same in the NFL, or is it going to be more? A lot of guys are better players in the NFL than they were in college. It's crazy enough. And other guys, You just never see it in the NFL, and you wonder why. So you try to say, is that translatable? Can I picture him on our team, in our defense, on our offense, on our special teams, doing the things that you see well in college? Can you imagine that? That's more probably feel and experience than anything else for me. Then the other part of it, when you talk to those guys, is just do they have what it takes? Do they have the right mindset towards success? Are they going to be thinking the right way? Is their head going to be in the right space? Because it's tough, and can they keep it simple and keep it about what really matters and not get caught up in the things that don't matter? That's, how's the guy built that way, character-wise, if you want to use that word? Are they going to be the type of guys you need that are going to maximize their own ability? So, like anybody would with any kind of evaluation, right? You try to figure who the person is.
Joe, how many guys have you guys lost from combines for physicals, character? Like, what do you do, like, with Jalen Carter type thing? Although you do have an advantage because you got Monken on staff.
Yeah, we certainly do. We know the Georgia players with Todd, but we're still going through that process, and we'll have medical meetings, and then we'll talk it over with the coaching staff. Steve Claggett does a great job with all our background investigations and research, so we kind of talk through it. We don't eliminate anyone based on a quote-unquote grade. It's a discussion and a conversation that we talk through with the coaching staff during the meetings.
You've had one free agent come in from the outside of the organization so far this offseason. How difficult has it been to augment this roster ahead of the draft?
Not too much, not too bad, I would say. I mean, we've signed a lot of free agents. They just had played for us in the past. We had a lot of guys we wanted back, is what it amounts to. And guys that, have played winning football for us. We've never been a big free agency team prior to this year. We very much pick and choose. It's based on a lot of different factors. So it's a bigger picture team building strategy that I believe in, that goes back to Ozzie, that John and Ozzie have developed over the years, and Coach Billick and Ozzie and everything. It's just the way that we operate. And so for us, the draft will always be paramount. It'll always be our biggest and best way of improving our team for the long term. So that's what we believe in. We're not done, as Ozzie has said a million times. The roster's not set till September. And we'll have a lot of different opportunities, pre-draft, post-draft, to build a strong football team. We'll take advantage of every single mechanism that we can. Free agency, undrafted free agency, trades, waiver wire pickups, whatever that might be, to build the best team we can. So this is just really the beginning, not the end.
One thing I might just add too, you look at kind of the way we're built, we're really not a team that you'd go in and say, hey, this team was going to sign a lot of free agents because of all the draft picks we've had. We've had 8, 9, 10, 12, 11 draft picks in the last 3 years, so most of those guys are still there. Most of those guys are, take a guy like our Darius Washington, just a guy. He was a free agent. We like him as a player, just to give you one name. We think he's got a future as a player. We're going to go out and sign players, on top of these players that we're still developing. We're going to be a young team next year. Plus, like Eric mentioned, we signed a number of free agents who are our own guys already coming back. So when you like the players that you have, you drafted all those guys, you're developing those guys. You're not like, the cupboard's not bare where we need to go out and sign a bunch of free agents. We think we need to just to dismiss or just to cross out the guys that we're trying to grow. So see where these guys grow and they develop, and trust our young, trust our evaluation, trust our development, and give these guys a chance to go play. I think that was more the mindset this offseason.
John, you mentioned some of the characteristics you look for out of receivers. When it comes to some of the undersized receivers like Zay Flowers, you guys have drafted Hollywood in the past, but to some of these undersized receivers, what do you look for to know that their size can be something that translates at this level?
Such a great question, and what does undersized mean? I mean, Zay, he may be kind of short. What is he, 5'9"? Yeah. But he's not small. He's not a little guy. This guy's a strong guy. Plus, he can accelerate. He's got great explosiveness. Addison at USC, he's another guy. He's a small guy, but you watch his stride. He opens up his stride. This guy's ability to control his body and his balance. For Marquise, it was that explosiveness that you saw and ability to track downfield. So, what's the trait? What's their superpower? So yeah, if your superpower is not size, there's got to be one or two other superpowers that are going to help you to be successful in this league. And you try to look at that individual and say, okay, what's going to be the key for him? What's going to be the trait that's going to make the difference? So, I don't think Zay is an undersized guy is off our board. I don't think Addison's off our board as a quote-unquote undersized guy. You know, they've got superpowers that are going to make them successful. It's just what's the best fit in our offense, and are they there, you know, and who else is there at that time?
Eric, you've talked a lot about how much you like your young players and, you know, giving guys a chance. Would you drafted Owe in the first round and Ajabo in the second round, essentially he was viewed as a first-round pick. Would that impact at all the pursuit of an edge rusher early in the draft? Because inevitably, if you added another early round guy in, it would, you know, impact their snaps or so forth.
Well, I mean, if Will Anderson's there, we're probably going to take him, Jeff. You know, I mean, it just depends on the player. You know, I would never want to say no and then we take a guy. It just depends on the player, how good we think the player is going to be. If we think the player can be Terrell Suggs or Lawrence Taylor, probably take the guy.
Eric, at the beginning, you talked about the challenges this offseason. Where has that taken you now to directly impact the draft and where you are today?
Oh, man, I just think, you know, the challenges for me have just been being able to get as much tape done as possible. You know, we've been on the go since the end of the season. You know, we've signed a bunch of our guys back. We've been doing a lot of contracts. You know, we're just trying to get the board set, really. This is our chance. You know, we don't have a lot of picks. I referenced the Chris McAllister draft earlier this offseason as a really great draft because of what we were able to do with a small amount of picks. And that's our challenge this year. We don't have a lot of picks. We want to nail those picks as best as we can and find guys to make the team better. Our scouts and coaches have got to do a great job with undrafted free agency. And then we'll assess post-draft players that are still there. How can we use our money wisely, knowing that we don't have a ton of money? You guys all know that. You can see what our cap situation is. How do we use that money wisely? How do we get creative with what we do to build the best team we can?
Eric, I think every year we always ask you about wide receivers and the challenge of evaluating it, and you've pretty much hit Pro Bowl players at every position except wide receiver. I mean, does it get to the point where you would, how satisfying would it be where you would not have to be asked about wide receiver questions in the future?
You know what? I've been here 28 years. If it wasn't receiver, you guys would be asking something else. I mean, that's the reality. It would be the offensive line, it would be the quarterback position, it would be the secondary. It's just with the nature of the beast, right? So we want to address as many positions. There's never been a perfect team. I've never seen a perfect team yet in the NFL. We aspire to it, but I haven't seen that team. So we're always going to have a weakness. We're always going to have a point of emphasis. We're always going to have something we're trying to fix. It's like a house. You buy a house, you think, oh, great. Then the next year something breaks, right? The next year something needs to be replaced. It's just like running a football team. There's always things that need to be replaced and fixed, rebuilt, added on, you know, whatever that might be. And so that's where we are every single year. And so if it wasn't receiver, it'd be something else. That's the nature of this business.
Joe, with another Maryland question for you. Deontay Banks, obviously getting first round buzz. I guess, you know, a lot of people talk about his physicality and just how effective he can be a press man. Just kind of big picture with as much zone as played around the league. I guess what is kind of the value of having a guy who can get up in a guy's face and be that kind of player?
Yeah, I mean, when you can get up there and disrupt the timing of the wideouts release and the timing of the play, that's a big thing, you know, in terms of affecting an offense's ability to execute. So he does a great job of that. He's very physical. He takes pride in it, and he does it well. So I think that's something that's one of his strengths, certainly.
So much focus is on the first round of the draft, but you know, where are you finding the depth in this one, in the third, fourth, fifth round that you can attack and kind of as an area of focus?
Yeah, you know, I think Eric mentioned, you know, wide receiver being a deep position, and it is. If you look at our board, it's all the way throughout. You know, there's targets in multiple rounds. Pass rusher is another one, outside backer. You know, us playing the rush Sam aspect, you know, I think there's just different variations of players, but there's guys that can play in space and do more of the dropping, and certainly the edge setters and the pass rushers. So those are two deep ones, and then corner's another one. You know, it's a good deep class of corner. So I think we'll be able to find some day 3 prospects at those positions.
Eric, I know you've scouted all of your picks that you've been involved with in 28 years, and you've had a lot more hits than misses. When you look at the misses, what have they taught you in terms of, all right, don't fall in love with this when you're drafting a player?
Yeah, I think, I think sometimes need can factor into that, you feel a crunch and you see there's only one guy left at that position and you take him at the expense of other players that might be better players at other positions. And I think you can't really discount a negative report. It's easy to do, and so it's kind of psychologically how your mind works. You have 6 guys that love a player and 1 guy who doesn't love the player, and you tend to think to yourself, oh, that guy's wrong. That one scout is wrong. And so, he might be right. One of our great scouts we've ever had, guys I've heard me talk about him, Ron Marcinak. What made Ron great was he didn't care what anybody else thought about players. He didn't go and look at mock drafts. He wasn't on Twitter reading all the stuff about players. He just sat in a dark room and evaluated guys. He didn't care if everybody else in the organization loved the guy. He didn't care. And, I could give you some incredible examples where he would take a guy that was going to be the first pick in the draft or the 5th pick in the draft and would give him a free agent grade. And we'd all be looking at him like, and you know what? A lot of those guys never made it past their 3rd year in the league. And it's incredible, right, Joe?
Yeah.
I mean, incredible. So that's a mistake I think sometimes that the decision maker has to avoid, is to not dismiss one report at the expense of a bunch of other reports. You've got to really look into that. You've got to consider the other path, so to speak, and do your homework. And that's what we try to do.
All right, thanks, guys.